At 10:47 p.m., the silver sedan rolled past the locked gates of the state Supreme Court, its tires whispering over wet pavement. Justice Lena Whitaker kept both hands on the wheel and watched the courthouse disappear in her rearview mirror. The service entrance behind her was already swallowed by darkness. In the pocket of her charcoal wool coat, her phone held the photograph she had received 40 minutes earlier, her own front door, taken from across the street. Beneath it, one sentence: "Delay the ruling, or your security will fail." She had changed cars, changed her route, and left through a door normally used by court employees. Still, 3 blocks later, blue lights flashed across her windshield. A patrol cruiser angled behind her, pinning the sedan against the curb outside a closed pharmacy. The cruiser door opened. Officer Grant Mercer approached with one hand resting near his belt, his flashlight sweeping over the car before stopping on Whitaker's face. "License and registration," he said, "and keep your hands where I can see them." Whitaker lowered the window 2 inches. Cold rain dotted the glass and gathered along the collar of her coat. "Officer, may I ask why I was stopped?" "Rear plates obscured." "By what?" "We'll get to that." His beam cut across her eyes. She blinked once, then placed her license and registration on the edge of the window. Her judicial identification followed. Mercer glanced at the first 2 cards and left the third untouched. "What's this?" "My identification." "I can see that." He leaned closer, studying her pearl earrings, her tailored coat, the black folder resting on the passenger seat. "You dress like a lawyer. What are you doing in a government zone after hours?" "Driving home." "From where?" "The courthouse." Mercer looked over his shoulder toward the empty street. In the patrol car, a white passenger sat behind the wheel, watching. "Dispatch," Mercer said into his radio. "I have a female driver possibly impersonating a state official." Whitaker's thumb pressed against the edge of her phone inside her coat pocket. She could hear the radio crackle, then a woman's voice asked for clarification. Mercer ignored it. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." The word carried a mocking lift, unlike the respectful "sir" he had just used with the man in the cruiser. "Officer, I've provided my license, registration, and judicial identification. What is the lawful basis for ordering me out?" Mercer's flashlight struck the roof with a sharp metallic knock. "First, it's a plate violation. Then we'll discuss the possibility this car is stolen. You just said the plate was obscured, and now you're refusing a lawful order." Rain ticked against the sedan. Whitaker glanced toward the pharmacy window and caught a faint reflection of a black SUV parked half a block away. Her security detail had found her. Mercer did not notice. He bent toward the open window, his voice dropping low. "People who think titles make them untouchable usually learn otherwise." Then his hand moved toward his radio. "Control, start backup. Suspect is non-compliant." "Control, start backup. Suspect is non-compliant." Mercer kept his eyes on Whitaker as he spoke, though her hands remained flat on the steering wheel. The patrol car's radio answered in a burst of static. "Unit 12, clarify noncompliance. Driver refusing to exit. Possible stolen vehicle. Possible impersonation of a state official." Whitaker turned her head slightly toward the cruiser. The white passenger had lowered his window. "Sir," Mercer called, "stay inside." His tone was firm, almost courteous. Then he looked back at her. "You heard the order. I heard 3 different reasons for this stop. You're making it 4. I'm asking for the lawful basis. You don't get to cross-examine me on the side of the road." He tapped the flashlight against the roof again. The sound traveled through the sedan's metal frame and into her ribs. Behind her calm expression, Whitaker felt the tight pull of the seat belt across her chest. Her phone was still in her coat pocket. One silent tap would bring Marcus and Tasha out of the SUV, but she had already given them the signal to wait. In the pharmacy window, the SUV remained dark. A small green light blinked behind the tinted glass. Recording. Mercer's body camera showed no matching light. Its lens was black. "Officer Mercer," she said, My judicial identification confirms who I am. You have not even read it. Because anyone can carry a card. Then verify it. I'm trying to figure out whether you're connected to this vehicle. He pointed at the silver sedan. Who owns it? The state motor pool. So not you. It was assigned to me. Assigned by whom? That is not relevant to a plate stop. Everything becomes relevant when a driver refuses basic questions. He slid the registration between two gloved fingers without looking at it. Expensive coat. State vehicle. Government district after midnight. You expect me not to ask questions. It is 10:49 p.m. That's not an answer. It's the time. His jaw tightened. Step out, ma'am. The mocking lift returned. Whitaker looked past him at the courthouse lights, barely visible beyond the ring. She had spent 11 hours inside that building reviewing testimony from families whose complaints had disappeared into police files. Tomorrow, the court was scheduled to hear arguments in the misconduct case that could expose the department's pattern of retaliatory stops. The sealed folder on the passenger seat contained one witness statement still hidden from the public. If Mercer searched the car, he could claim he had discovered it during an ordinary investigation. If she fought him, he could turn her resistance into proof. You're asking about the courthouse, she said. Now you're asking about a sealed file. For the first time, Mercer's flashlight stopped moving. His eyes shifted to the black folder. Open the door. Why? Because I said so. That is not a legal reason. Somewhere behind them, another siren began to rise, distant at first, then steadily louder. Mercer leaned closer until rainwater dripped from the brim of his cap onto the sedan's window. You can cooperate, he whispered, or I can make this very serious. Then he reached for the driver's door handle. Mercer's fingers closed around the driver's door handle. Whitaker pressed the lock button, but the mechanism clicked too late. He pulled once, hard, and the door sprang open against the rain. Cold air rushed across her lap. Keep your hands on the wheel, he snapped. I am keeping them there. Then step out. I'm not consenting to a search. Nobody asked for consent. He wedged one boot against the door and reached across the opening. The smell of wet leather and coffee followed him into the sedan. Whitaker's phone shifted against her coat as she leaned back from his arm. Officer Mercer, you are blocking my door. You're obstructing me. I'm seated in a vehicle you have not established probable cause to search. His mouth tightened. You really do like hearing yourself talk. Behind him, the second officer finally climbed out of the patrol car. He was younger, pale beneath the blue-white wash of the cruiser lights, and kept one hand near his holster while rain darkened the shoulders of his uniform. Mercer glanced toward him. Officer Dugan, check the passenger compartment. Whitaker's gaze dropped to the black folder on the seat. The court seal showed through the clear plastic sleeve. If Dugan touched it, the sealed statement could be exposed to two officers who had no reason to see it. She reached toward the folder. Do not touch that. Mercer's hand shot forward, stopping inches from her wrist. Now you're reaching? I'm protecting sealed court material. You're moving evidence. You have no warrant. I don't need one if I believe evidence is being destroyed. What evidence? Dugan asked. Mercer looked at him, then at Whitaker. The pause was brief, but it hung in the wet air. Possible police homicide file, he said. She may have removed it from the courthouse. Whitaker felt her pulse strike once beneath her jaw. That was not a guess. He knew what kind of file it was. She had not mentioned the officer's death, the sealed witness statement, or tomorrow's hearing. You stopped me for a plate, she said. Now you're investigating a homicide? You're not in charge of this stop. Neither are you if you cannot state its basis. Dugan shifted closer. In the pharmacy window, the black SUV remained motionless, its green recording light blinking steadily through the tint. Marcus and Tasha were watching every second. Whitaker kept her eyes on Mercer and made the smallest downward motion with two fingers. Wait. Mercer mistook the gesture for surrender. He grabbed the upper door frame and leaned into the car, his flashlight beam sliding over her hands. Out. Slowly. I am requesting your supervisor. You're requesting a lot. He lifted his radio. Control, driver is reaching around inside the vehicle and refusing repeated commands. Whitaker stared at the microphone inches from his mouth. That statement is false. Mercer's eyes hardened. Step out now, or I will remove you. In the dark SUV, Marcus's hand moved toward the door. Whitaker saw it reflected in the pharmacy glass. She whispered without turning her head, "Not yet." Then Mercer reached past her shoulder and seized the door frame, trapping her between the seat belt and his arm. "Last warning," he said. "Tell me who you really are. Tell me who you really are." Mercer's forearm blocked the open doorway, rainwater running from his sleeve onto the leather beside Whitaker's hip. She could smell the coffee on his breath. Her seat belt pressed hard across her ribs, but she kept her hands open on the wheel. "You have my name," she said. "You have my license. You have my registration. You have my judicial identification. That card could be fake. Then verify it. You don't give orders here." His flashlight slid over her face and stopped at the silver pin on her lapel, the state seal she wore beneath her coat. "People like you always think a piece of paper makes them special." From the cruiser, Officer Dugan shifted his weight. "Mercer," he said quietly, "should we wait for the supervisor?" Mercer didn't look back. "You heard the dispatch. She's reaching around, hiding evidence, refusing to identify herself." "I've identified myself 3 times, Whitaker said. "Not to my satisfaction." The words landed with a familiar chill. "Not to my satisfaction." That was how a person turned a demand into a moving target. Whitaker had heard it in courtrooms from witnesses who wanted permission to punish someone. She had used the law for 26 years to force facts into the light. Tonight, the law was being used as a flashlight in her eyes. Her thumb touched the edge of her phone through the wool pocket. One tap. Marcus and Tasha would be beside her in seconds. She could hear the faint hum of the SUV's engine through the rain, close enough to feel like a second heartbeat. But she also remembered the message on her phone, the photograph of her front door, and the line beneath it, "Or your security will fail." Whoever had sent it knew her home, her schedule, and the fact that she had trusted 2 people to keep her alive. That trust had not come easily. Marcus had been a state trooper before becoming her chief protection officer, broad-shouldered and patient, with a habit of counting exits before he sat down. Tasha had worked federal protective operations and spoke in clipped, practical sentences that made fear sound like a problem with a solution. They had begged her not to leave alone. She had changed vehicles anyway. Not because she distrusted them, because she needed to know whether the breach was inside the court's security system or inside her own detail. Justice Whitaker, Tasha had warned earlier, her voice low inside the motor pool garage. If someone has your route, this is no longer a normal threat. Whitaker had fastened her seat belt and looked at the dark sedan's plain dashboard. "That's why I'm driving it. You're using yourself as bait. I'm using the truth as bait." Now Mercer jerked the door wider. "Out. Officer, your body camera is not recording." His hand froze for half a second. "You don't know that. The status light is dark. Don't worry about my equipment. I am worried about every piece of evidence at this scene." Dugan glanced at Mercer's camera, then quickly away. In the pharmacy window, Marcus lifted one hand inside the SUV. Whitaker saw the motion. "Ready." She kept her eyes on Mercer and whispered, "Not yet." Mercer leaned closer, his face hardening as though he had heard her. "Dispatch," he said. "Send another unit. The suspect is attempting to conceal something." Then he reached inside the sedan and closed his fingers around the black folder bearing the court seal. Then he reached inside the sedan and closed his fingers around the black folder bearing the court seal. Whitaker caught the edge before he could pull it free. The plastic sleeve squeaked between them. "Release that folder," she said. "It may contain evidence connected to an officer killed in the line of duty." Dugan's face changed. "What?" Mercer yanked harder. "Possible homicide material," he said. "She may have removed it from the courthouse." "You stopped me for a plate," Whitaker said. Now you're claiming I'm carrying evidence from a homicide investigation? I'm following what I see. You see a sealed court file. I see someone refusing to explain why she has it. Mercer's thumb pressed into the folder's spine. The court seal bent beneath his glove. Whitaker let go, not because she had surrendered it, but because Marcus and Tasha were still watching, and she needed Mercer to show exactly what he intended to do with it. Officer Dugan, Mercer said, holding up the folder, open the passenger door. Dugan hesitated beside the cruiser. Do we have a warrant? We have reasonable suspicion. Based on what? Based on her behavior. My behavior has been sitting here, Whitaker said. Your behavior has been concealing evidence. Mercer's flashlight snapped toward her. You're going to stop talking. The rain had strengthened, striking the sedan's roof in a fast metallic rattle. Beyond the pharmacy window, the black SUV's headlights remained off. Marcus's silhouette was visible behind the tinted glass, still as a statue. Tasha had shifted to the rear passenger side, one hand near the concealed radio at her shoulder. Whitaker felt the urge to give the signal. Instead, she kept her voice level. What evidence do you believe this folder contains? Mercer looked down at the seal. Information about an officer who died during an active investigation. Which officer? You know exactly which one. I do not. Then why are you taking the file home? I am not taking it home. I am transporting it under judicial seal. That's not your decision. He leaned closer, lowering his voice again. You're going to tell me what's inside, or I'll document that you obstructed a lawful investigation. Whitaker's eyes moved to the dark lens of his body camera. You are documenting nothing. Mercer's jaw flexed. Dugan, search the vehicle. The younger officer reached for the passenger side handle. Whitaker watched his wet fingers close around it, then looked past him toward the pharmacy glass. Marcus raised 2 fingers. Tasha answered with one. They had understood the count. 2 officers, 1 weapon visible, 1 camera disabled. Mercer pulled the passenger door open. Under the folder, half hidden by the seat, lay Whitaker's phone. Its screen had awakened. The photograph of her front door glowed beneath the rain-streaked window. Mercer saw it. His eyes narrowed. Where did you get that picture? Where did you get that picture? Mercer asked. His voice had changed. The mockery was gone, replaced by something sharper. Whitaker watched his eyes remain fixed on the glowing screen. Not the folder. Not her hands. The photograph. It was sent to me, she said. By whom? That is not relevant to your traffic stop. It is now. He reached for the phone. Whitaker moved first, sliding it across the leather seat and away from his glove. Do not touch my property. Mercer's fingers stopped inches above it. Rainwater dripped from his sleeve onto the court folder. You're carrying a sealed police file, you're driving a state vehicle after hours, and somebody sends you a picture of your house. You expect me to believe those things are unrelated? I expect you to explain why you recognize the significance of the photograph. His face tightened. For 1 second, the only sound was rain hammering the roof and the distant hiss of tires on the avenue. Then Mercer looked toward Dugan. Run the phone. We can't search it without. I said run the phone. Dugan glanced at Whitaker, then at the body camera hanging dark against Mercer's chest. Mercer, this is getting outside a traffic stop. You want to keep your badge? Mercer snapped. The threat landed harder than the rain. Whitaker felt her thumb press against the phone's edge. In the black SUV's reflection, Marcus leaned forward. Tasha's hand rose toward the concealed microphone. Whitaker gave the smallest downward motion. Wait. She needed Mercer to say it himself. You knew which vehicle I switched into, she said. You knew I left through the service entrance. You knew I would turn onto this street. Mercer's stare returned to her. You're making accusations. I'm asking a question. You think because you sit on that bench, you can invent facts? You called this car stolen before checking the registration. You called me an impersonator before reading my identification. Then you saw a sealed file and named the officer connected to it. His mouth opened, but no answer came. Whitaker's pulse beat steadily now. The pieces had stopped looking separate. The threat, the darkened body camera, The changed reasons. The folder. Who gave you my route? She asked. Mercer stepped closer. Get out of the car. Who gave you my route? You're detained. For what? Failure to obey a traffic officer. That was not the original reason. It doesn't matter. He turned toward his radio. Dispatch. Subject is reaching inside the vehicle. Whitaker's hands remained visible on the wheel. Dugan stared at them. She isn't reaching. Mercer's head snapped toward him. You want to explain that in your report? The backup siren grew louder. Blue light washed over the pharmacy's wet windows. Marcus's hand closed around the SUV door handle. Whitaker looked at Mercer's empty body camera lens and understood the design. Provoke her, claim movement, bring armed officers into the story, then let his report bury everything else. Not yet, she whispered. Mercer heard her this time. He smiled without warmth and reached for her wrist. You're coming with us until we figure out who you really are. You're coming with us until we figure out who you really are. Mercer's gloved hand closed around Whitaker's wrist. His grip was not yet painful, but it carried a promise. The seat belt cut across her chest as he pulled, trapping her between the driver's seat and the open door. Remove your hand, she said. Stop resisting. I am not resisting. Subject is resisting detention. Mercer barked toward his radio. Possible weapon inside the vehicle. The words traveled through the speaker, flat and official, and Whitaker felt the scene tilt beneath her. Behind the cruiser, two backup officers hurried through the rain, hands hovering near their holsters. Blue light strobed across the pharmacy window, turning Marcus's dark SUV into a shifting reflection. She could see him inside, one hand on the door handle, his shoulders rigid. Tasha sat behind him with the radio pressed to her mouth. Neither moved. Whitaker had ordered them to wait, and now that order felt like a stone in her throat. Officer, Dugan said, I don't see a weapon. Mercer tightened his fingers around her wrist. You weren't told to look. Her hands are visible. Then watch the car. Mercer pulled again. Whitaker's shoulders struck the door frame. The folder slid from the passenger seat and landed in a shallow puddle beneath the open door, its plastic sleeve flashing beneath the street lamp. Mercer glanced at it, then at the approaching officers. Secure the file, he said. Nobody touches that folder, Whitaker replied. You are not giving instructions. It is sealed court material. You're under detention. On what charge? Her voice stayed level, but her free hand had begun to tremble against the steering wheel. She curled her fingers inward until the nails pressed into her palm. Mercer leaned close enough for her to see rain caught in the creases beside his eyes. You should have shown some respect when you had the chance. Respect is not obedience to an unlawful order. Put her in cuffs, one of the backup officers said. Whitaker turned toward him. Officer, look at my hands. He did. For half a second, uncertainty crossed his face. Then Mercer stepped between them. She reached under the seat. I saw her. That is false, Whitaker said. The report will reflect what happened. Mercer's mouth curved slightly. And the report is what matters. In the SUV, Marcus's hand lifted toward the emergency release. Tasha shook her head once. Wait. Whitaker saw the signal and understood the danger. Mercer was trying to force a reaction before the detail could reveal itself. If Marcus moved now, Mercer would call it an attack. If she fought, the false weapon claim would become the first sentence in every account. The backup officers moved closer. One drew his weapon halfway from the holster. Rain ran cold beneath Whitaker's collar. Mercer began pulling her from the sedan. Last chance, he said. Tell us who you really are. Then the nearest officer shouted, She's got something, and every weapon in the street turned toward the woman trapped beneath the courthouse seal. Every weapon in the street turned toward the woman trapped beneath the courthouse seal. Marcus moved first. The black SUV's doors flew open, and he crossed the wet pavement in 3 strides, his voice cutting through the rain. Lower your weapons. Now. Tasha came from the opposite side, one hand raised, the other holding a federal protective credential beneath the flashing blue lights. Protective detail, she shouted. Step away from Justice Whitaker. Mercer froze with his fingers still locked around Lena's wrist. Who the hell are you? The people you should have noticed before you put your hands on her, Marcus said. He stepped between Mercer and the open sedan, broad shoulders blocking the officer's grip. Tasha positioned herself between Lena and the backup officers, her credential shining inches from the nearest gun. She is a sitting justice of the state Supreme Court. Secure your weapons and take 3 steps back. She's under arrest, Mercer snapped. For what? Tasha asked. Failure to identify? Vehicle theft? A plate violation? Pick one. Mercer's mouth opened, but the answer never came. From somewhere beneath the SUV, a speaker crackled to life. His own voice rolled across the street, clear beneath the rain. People who think titles make them untouchable usually learn otherwise. Then another recording followed. Possible weapon inside the vehicle. A pause. Dugan's voice, unmistakable. I don't see a weapon. The backup officer who had half drawn his pistol slowly pushed it back into its holster. Marcus reached for Mercer's wrist, not violently, but with the controlled precision of someone trained to stop a dangerous mistake. Release her. This recording is illegal, Mercer said. You were conducting a public stop, Tasha replied. You had no reasonable expectation of privacy. The speaker played Mercer again. The report will reflect what happened. Then, and the report is what matters. Lena felt his grip loosen. Marcus took his hand away from her wrist and placed himself fully between them. For the first time all night, Mercer was no longer controlling the distance, the doorway, or the story. Lena stepped out of the sedan, her charcoal coat darkened at the shoulders, rain gathering on her pearl earrings. The folder lay in the puddle beside her shoe. She bent, lifted it carefully, and handed it to Tasha. Seal intact, Tasha said. No one opens it. Mercer pointed toward Lena. She's interfering with an investigation. No, Lena answered, her voice quiet enough that everyone leaned in to hear it. You were not investigating me. You were trying to manufacture a crime. Mercer stared at her. Justice Whitaker? One of the backup officers whispered. Lena turned toward him. Yes, and I want every officer here to remember this moment before anyone writes a report. She looked at Mercer's dark body camera, then at the patrol cruiser, then at the blinking cameras hidden in the SUV. No one leaves. No weapon is moved. No recording is erased. Call the state inspector general, not your local supervisor. Mercer's face drained beneath the rain. You can't order that. Lena's phone buzzed inside her coat. A new message appeared on the screen. You should have listened. Beneath it was a photograph of Marcus and Tasha standing in the street, taken from somewhere close. The message glowed between them. You should have listened. Beneath it was a photograph of Marcus and Tasha standing in the street, taken from somewhere close. Tasha's eyes narrowed. Nobody moves, she said. Marcus, sweep the pharmacy and the alley. Marcus turned toward the dark storefront, one hand near his radio. Already moving. No, Lena said. You stay where the cameras can see you. She looked at the officers. That photograph is evidence. Preserve the scene exactly as it is. The backup officers lowered their hands from their holsters. Dugan stared at Mercer. You told dispatch she reached for a weapon. She did reach. Her hands never left the wheel. Mercer's face had lost its color. You don't know what you saw. Lena held up her phone. The sender accessed my security schedule, knew my vehicle change, and knew where my detail would position itself. Officer Mercer knew the route before he stopped me. Tasha stepped beside her, rain dripping from the brim of her cap. Inspector General's office is on the line. They're sending investigators and a digital forensics team. Mercer glanced toward the patrol cruiser. You can't take over a local traffic stop. This stopped being a traffic stop when you fabricated a weapon claim, Lena said. It became an official misconduct scene. Marcus returned from the pharmacy's side entrance carrying a small black device sealed in a plastic evidence bag. Found this magnetized beneath the pharmacy's newspaper box. Camera pointed directly at the street. Tasha examined the label. Same contractor used by courthouse security. Lena felt the pieces settle into place. The anonymous threat. The route. Mercer's questions about the sealed file. Call the Chief Justice, she said, and preserve the court's access logs. By dawn, investigators had found the breach. A private security contractor named Calvin Rusk had obtained the court's confidential schedule through a subcontractor and sent Mercer the route information. Rusk's company had been paid by officers facing exposure in the police misconduct case. Mercer had agreed to frighten Lena into delaying the ruling, then planned to use the sealed witness statement as the foundation for a false evidence charge. His body camera failure, dispatch recordings, patrol car audio, pharmacy camera, and the protective details footage left no room for the report he had promised to write. Mercer was suspended that morning, stripped of his badge weeks later, and charged with official misconduct, falsifying a report, and conspiracy to obstruct a judicial proceeding. Rusk was arrested for obstruction and conspiracy. Dugan testified. The backup officers admitted they had nearly drawn their weapons because Mercer's lie had sounded official. 3 months later, Lena entered the Supreme Court chamber wearing the same silver pin beneath a fresh charcoal coat. Families filled the gallery, hands folded over worn purses and work gloves. She read the ruling aloud. A person's race, clothing, title, or refusal to answer irrelevant questions cannot transform a lawful stop into retaliation. Her voice carried to the back wall. Afterward, Marcus asked whether she regretted driving alone that night. Lena looked through the tall windows at the courthouse gates shining in the morning sun. No, she said. I needed to know whether our security had failed. Tasha handed her the preserved phone, the threat message still visible. Lena deleted it, then closed the screen. It didn't, she said. The truth held. And outside the courthouse, where rain had once swallowed her front door in a stranger's photograph, Justice Lena Whitaker walked home beneath 2 watchful shadows, not because her security had failed, but because the law had finally learned to stand beside her.